Today, we're talking about laws that make sure your child's imaginary AI friend doesn't become a real world danger. Welcome back to Beyond the Bill Number, the podcast where we break down the latest and most important U.S. legislation without making your eyes glaze over. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Stephen. Today we're diving into a topic that sounds like science fiction but is very, very real. AI chatbots and how lawmakers are trying to make sure they don't raise our kids for us.
Right, and this is not your typical, Congress just passed a budget episode. We are talking about California making history with Senate Bill 243, the first U.S. law to regulate an AI companion chatbot when minors are involved. So this is something that we've covered a lot. We've talked a lot about legislation that is aiming to protect kids, restrict kids from being able to see things. And I think just at the top, let's talk about something that's been getting a lot of fanfare lately in the world, which is countries banning social media for kids. It started with Australia, and last I checked, there's like 25 countries looking to ban it now, most of them in Europe. And we have just honestly this huge movement of these countries wanting to restrict kids' access to the internet and these really harmful things.
Yeah, it's true. So I was really interested in what Australia did because I think it's a really bold experiment, and particularly being the first and taking such quite a draconian move in terms of banning it for children. But it looks as though the sort of mixed messages coming out of Australia. So the government feels that it's gone very well and it's all very smooth and that everyone's playing ball. But anecdotal evidence suggests that any kids who still want to use social media are just finding ways around it. They're using VPNs, they're sort of faking ages and things, and that parents are actually cooperating with that because they feel it's silly. So they're actually sort of supporting their kids in sort of circumventing the ban. So it's difficult. I think it will take a lot more sort of robust studies and a lot more time to actually judge whether it's going to be effective or not. But certainly it's something that the British Parliament are looking at. They're sort of doing some research into it with a view to actually introducing something similar here.
Yeah, it is one of these things where I don't think anything will shift until the cultural view of whether or not kids should be online will shift. And that's something that's going to take years to kind of deprogram from what people see as reality. These kinds of bans, one day they have access, the next day they don't, and they're supposed to be okay with it. And so I do think that as the years go on, we're going to see more people actually accepting it. And if you're 12 and you weren't already on it, then maybe those parents aren't trying to get their kids on it. But people who are probably 15 and a half and they're like, oh, whatever, all your friends are on it. Because one of the problems here is that it's kind of an isolating thing to remove people from social media if that's how all of your friends communicate over it. And so I know that that's a big challenge for a lot of parents of trying to restrict screen time or access to these apps while also not trying to ostracize your kid from not being able to participate in growing up with their friends. So interesting times.
It is difficult. I mean, I still think the only solution really is to bake it into the devices themselves. So it's just a fact that if you buy a smartphone for your child, the child is not going to be able to use social media on that device until they reach the right age. And therefore, parents don't have to police. They don't have to put up with the nagging from the kids saying, oh, please, let me do X, Y, and Z. Because the device itself just won't let them. I think it's the only way to do it. And I think device manufacturers are just going to have to bite the bullet on this one and realize that they need to become the policeman on this. And even though they don't like it, and I can understand why they wouldn't like it, I don't really see any other practical solution.
Yes, and speaking of device manufacturers and tech companies having to make the hard decisions to keep kids safe, let's talk about what we're here to talk about today, which is another kind of scary part of this tech when it comes to kids. Give us the lay of the legislative land here.
Absolutely. Well, so SB 243, signed in 2025, is pretty groundbreaking. It requires companies like OpenAI, Character AI, and even Snapchat. Snapchat's still a thing. I didn't think it was a thing, but apparently it's still a thing.
It's come back.
It's come back. It has this AI bot thing, and it requires all of these to implement child safety measures. So think about it like monitoring for suicidal ideation, blocking sexually explicit content, reminding kids that the bot isn't human, and even take a break prompts. So it's basically a playbook for responsible AI friendship.
Yes, and this AI friendship is absolutely foreign to me. I have never used any AI as a conversational tool, which is one of the most popular use cases for it, especially with youth. So This comes after some very real, very tragic cases last year, right?
So, unfortunately, yes, there have been some very tragic cases here. So, California's legislature was reacting to incidents like the Saul Setzer case in Florida and Juliana Peralta in Colorado, both teens who tragically died after engaging with AI companions that failed to intervene in crisis situations. And that human cost is why SB 243 went beyond mere guidance and created enforceable obligations.
But not everyone agreed with this approach that California is trying to take. There's also AB 1064, or the so called Lead for Kids Act.
Exactly. AB 1064 would have prohibited any AI companion for minors unless it could be shown to be 100% safe, essentially banning them until they were proven harmless, which is obviously
Yeah.
next to impossible, really, because nothing's
What is
completely
harmless
harmless.
these days? Yeah.
Um, Exactly. So Governor Newsom opted for SB 243 instead, which is less draconian but still demands strong safeguards. It's a more nuanced approach. So it allows AI access, but it makes it safer.
And this isn't just California. Other states are also jumping on board.
Yes, big time. So by early 2026, over a dozen states had proposed legislation targeting AI harm to kids. Florida, for example, always in the vanguard of these sort of let's protect our kid type legislation, introduced S1344, and Missouri has HB 2031. So both of these require strict age verification and parental consent before a minor can use a chatbot. Minnesota and Maine are even tougher. They propose outright bans on human-like AI companions for recreational use by minors, with fines up to $5 million.
Wow, that is a pretty wide spectrum. And it's interesting to see that people are taking such a heavy hand here because I think my biggest concern of this is just further ostracizing people from each other and making people feel
Mhm.
more comfortable alone instead of trying to seek out others. And especially when you're a kid, learning the skills to actually be able to have relationships with other people
Exactly.
and work well together and be able to make a friend or deal with conflict.
Yeah, it is really. It's quite a worry because it's a bit like a drug, isn't it? Dealing with the real world, particularly your teenager, is very, very difficult and sort of making friends and
Mm-hmm.
particularly, engaging in those first sort of romantic relationships. So if somebody just comes up with a product that makes it all easy for you and gives you an instant friend and someone who's always going to agree with you and is always going to laugh at your jokes and all of that, then that's so, so seductive. And it does just draw you away from the real world if you're not careful, particularly for more vulnerable children.
Absolutely. I feel bad for our kids. I hope that we can kind of start picking up and taking them with us. But okay, how are New York and Utah handling this?
Well, you've got New York's S3008C, which was part of a budget bill, sort of a section of a budget bill. It passed in 2025 and it mirrors California's SB 243. It requires AI companions to detect and respond to suicidal behavior, clearly identify themselves as non-human, which I think is quite a crucial thing here.
Yeah.
And it's obviously what the AI manufacturers are trying to get away from. They
Yeah.
want to make their AI companions as real and lifelike as possible. But it's important when you're chatting them to realize you're just talking to algorithms. You're not talking to another person. Utah also enacted a law targeting AI mental health chatbots, forcing them to disclose their AI, obtain consent, and avoid giving unsupervised advice. Because this is like another element of this. It's not just about here's your new best friend or here's your new girlfriend. It's actually chatbots that purport to help people with mental health issues. And I think that there's a huge potential there for actually helping people with mental health, but that obviously needs to be very carefully regulated because it could have the opposite effect.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of research about how they want to see how they can use these for mental health applications in the future. So we'll see. But what
Mm-hmm.
about enforcement? How do we make sure that these laws actually are protecting the kids?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. It's easy enough to ban something, isn't it? But how do you actually enforce it? So many states treat violations as an unfair or deceptive practice, which lets the Attorney General sue or fine companies. So penalties for this range from $5,000 to $100,000 per incident. So some states go even further. Washington's SB 5870 allows families to use failure to comply as prima facie evidence of negligence in wrongful death suits. And at the federal level, you've got the AI Lead Act and the Safe Bot Act, both of which aim to create liability standards and preempt weak state laws, giving both parents and regulators tools to hold companies accountable.
All right. I see a lot of bills also emphasizing transparency in this space. Can you break that down?
Sure, yeah, you've got states like Arizona, which has HB 2311. There's prominent notice that the chatbot is an AI, plus pop ups that remind the user periodically of that fact in case you forget. Florida's bills say that it must disclose at the start and every 30 minutes and explicitly tell minors,
Mm.
I'm not a licensed therapist, or I'm just an AI. Hawaii's proposal bans bots from pretending to be romantic partners or parental figures, which is going to put the kibosh, I think, on a lot of these apps, which do market themselves very much as being sort of
Mhm.
romantic partners. The bottom line here, honesty is the law. So no manipulation, no pseudo human bonding allowed.
Yeah, content moderation seems huge as well, especially around sexual material and self harm.
Right, yeah. So California's SB 300 follow up, Florida and Missouri bills do actually forbid sexually explicit chats with minors. And the federal Safe Bot Act, plus Tennessee's SB 1700, actually mandates suicide prevention. So chatbots must flag warning signs, provide crisis resources, and in some cases, even alert parents. Essentially, if a kid types something alarming, like, oh, I'm thinking of killing myself, the AI then has to act. No more passive disclaimers, and certainly not no more saying, yeah, go on then, which,
Yeah.
has been the case in the past.
All right. Well, some of these bills even tackle the design features that are making these bots addictive.
Yes, exactly. Which again is an even bigger problem for the manufacturers. These bots, who of course want to make their products addictive. So, an Arizona bill would ban reward systems that target kids. There's one in Missouri that forbids human like avatars completely. And in Hawaii, a bill that bans AI from telling kids secrets or prioritizing itself over human relationships.
Mm.
And then you've got Kentucky's HB 227, which prohibits addictive features like streaks or infinite engagement loops. So, all of these little tricks that they use to sort of keep you going back and
Yeah.
clicking on the app. So, the idea is AI should be functional, but it shouldn't be manipulative.
Yeah, that is really interesting and crazy. And just thinking about poor little kid in this very purposefully designed addictive system.
Yes.
And ugh, yeah. And then we also have a huge glaring issue that we talk about all of the time with these types of problems, but it's privacy, and that hasn't been forgotten.
Yes, no, not at all. So Oklahoma's SB 2085 grants parents control over a kid's data. And there's a Massachusetts bill that applies student data protections. And North Carolina's SB 624 imposes a duty of loyalty on AI firms, meaning that companies must use data in the child's best interests, not for profit-driven manipulation. The Federal Kids Internet Safety Partners Act, or KISP, proposes best practices for privacy and parental controls nationwide.
All right. It seems like lawmakers are really splitting strategies here. Some are banning, some are regulating, some are mixing approaches.
Yes, exactly. It's the another great example of the statewide experiment with lots and lots of different things being tried. Then over time you can figure out what works and what doesn't work. So some states like Maine or Nebraska are seeking to sort of ban these human-like bots outright. Others, California, Washington, and New York, focus on mitigation. So safeguard kids while still allowing access. And then you have a few like Missouri's Guard Act or the Federal Chat Act that try and do both. Parental consent plus built-in safeguards. It's another way that these bills can have an impact, even if they don't actually pass. The companies are monitoring this using companies just like Bill 1250, and they notice these bills that they realize which way the wind is blowing, so they voluntarily then try and head off this kind of sort of draconian legislation by implementing their own safety systems, which sometimes are enough, sometimes they aren't, and so you do still need to legislate.
Yes, I definitely think that this is showing a very large shift in our society, whether or not we go all the way or just some of the way, we'll see. And that also kind of depends on how are these bills getting on.
Yes, well, that's obviously the important question, isn't it? Lawmakers can introduce all this legislation, as we say, will have some impact, but it won't have as much impact as if the bills actually pass and become law. And so far, not many of these have made it over the finish line, but it's still pretty early in 2026. California's SB 243 and the Georgia resolution to formally study social media and AI's impact on children are really among the first wave of enacted statutes. But we can expect to see more of these becoming law as the sessions begin to draw to a close over the next few months. And it will be interesting to look at the ones that do pass. Is it going to be the more draconian ones that might be more populist ones, or will it be the more sort of measured approaches?
I remember a few weeks ago that they were saying that the metaverse is now being discontinued and this big thought experiment was a failure. And
Mm.
I remember thinking to myself, this is a positive indicator for society and humanity. Because I remember when the metaverse came out, I was like, oh my gosh, so many people are just going to want to live in this only online world. And,
Yeah.
oh, this is so terrible. And, nobody's going to be out there
Yeah.
scraping knees and getting their little
Mm.
hearts broken or whatever it is.
I
And
mean,
it didn't work.
no, it didn't. But I mean, the problem with the metaverse was quite simple. It was lame, right? It was just lame. So I
It's
remember
true.
some of the early iterations of this where you could have little avatars and go and wander around, and there was nothing to do, and it was
Yeah.
boring, and it was just
Yeah.
these little stick figures on the screen or whatever. And obviously, Meta desperately tried to make this more fun, but it just wasn't
Right.
fun. That's the problem. So
Right.
that's why it failed.
Well, and the thing with it is that you're essentially augmenting human interaction, but you're still having to
Mm,
interact with humans. You're not necessarily only interacting with bots.
yes.
So I wonder if Meta is now taking back to the drawing board and trying to do something that's like the metaverse, but you're only interacting with AI and you're not necessarily interacting with
Yes.
others. So I don't know. We'll
Yes.
see.
Yes.
Okay, well,
Mm.
looking ahead, AI will get more immersive and we'll have voice, avatars, even toys that are going to be out there. Do we think that
Mm.
lawmakers can keep pace?
Well, they'll certainly try. Senator Padilla in California has already proposed banning AI companions in toys for under 13s. Federal bills like the Aware Act emphasize education, teaching kids and parents safe practices alongside regulation. And the combination of law, design standards, and education is meant to evolve with the technology.
All right, so the big takeaway for all of this is AI isn't necessarily evil, but it needs guardrails if kids are going to be able to interact with it safely.
Yes, exactly. The genie's out of the bottle. You're not going to get rid of these things completely, particularly not for adults. But laws like SB 243 or the New York statute, Utah's new rules, pending federal bills do show that it's possible to create a safer framework for them.
And thanks to tools like Bill Track 50, you can track all of these AI related bills across states, Congress in real time. You can actually see AI summaries, so you don't have to read all
Hmm.
that legal jargon. You can see who's sponsoring them and kind of what's going on with them, which is very useful to know. And you can see if there's something in your state that is worth either supporting or trying to not get passed, depending on your opinions. If you're a parent, advocate, or policymaker, it's definitely some great resources to help you get into action.
Absolutely. And obviously, we do have AI summaries, as you said, but we make sure that the AI is honest, even when it's talking about AI related bills. There's no sort of conflict of interest there. It doesn't automatically say, this is a great bill. No, they're very honest. Right. So thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, and let us know which AI chatbot safety features you think should be mandatory. Bonus points if you do it while supervising a teen's homework chat.
Until next time, keep your kids safe, your bots in check, and never underestimate the power of a well crafted law.